Imagine being cast into the vast and unforgiving Indian Ocean, alone, with nothing but your skill and determination to face what lies ahead. After a devastating shipwreck, one man's desperate struggle to survive becomes a battle against not just the elements, but also his own mind. In an environment where the ocean is both enemy and lifeline, every decision becomes a matter of life or death. In this story, we'll explore the critical actions taken in moments of sheer desperation. From staying afloat against treacherous waves to using whatever resources were available to secure survival, each choice made was crucial. But which decisions truly made the difference between life and death? What can we learn from this extreme fight for survival? Get ready for a journey that delves deep into the psychology of survival, the strategies that could be the key when stranded in an unknown ocean, and the choices that define the line between hope and despair. Stay with us until the end of this tale of resilience and determination, and ask yourself, what would be your first actions if you found yourself adrift at sea? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more content on sea adventures and survival in the most challenging waters on the planet. The darkness swallowed the horizon as the Indian Ocean roared, a living monster of waves that rose like liquid mountains, crashing with brutal force against the hull of the Solace, a 1999 island packet 420. Elliot Grayson, 42 years old, gripped the helm with calloused hands, his eyes half closed against the stinging salt spray that burned his skin. The wind howled at 35 knots, and the storm, which he had underestimated by trusting week-old forecasts, now punished him mercilessly. His heart pounded unevenly, not just from physical exertion, but from the weight of a decision he knew was looming: fight or abandon. The Solace was his home, his dream, but the Indian Ocean respected no dreams. This is the story of Elliot, a solo sailor whose desperate struggle for survival after a shipwreck in the heart of the Indian Ocean would become an eternal lesson for those who live at sea. Elliot was no novice. He had sailed for years along the eastern coast of the United States, facing the whims of the Atlantic on coastal cruises. He held a maritime meteorology certification from the U.S. Sailing Association and was certified in Yanmar diesel engine repairs. His experience included short passages, such as from Miami to the Bahamas, but crossing the Indian Ocean, from Bali, Indonesia, to Port Louis, Mauritius, was his greatest endeavor. The route, part of a global circumnavigation, spanned 3,500 nautical miles, planned for 25 to 30 days depending on conditions. He had chosen the transition season between monsoons, hoping for favorable southeast winds and gentle currents. But the Indian Ocean, as he would learn, was a cruel master of surprises. The Solace was a robust sailboat designed by Robert K. Johnson for island packet yachts. At 13.59 meters in overall length, with a fiberglass hull and long keel, and a displacement of 13,608 kilograms, it was a reliable choice for long passages. Its 75 horsepower Yanmar engine, max prop feathering propeller, and tanks holding 606 liters of diesel and 946 liters of water provided weeks of autonomy. Elliot had invested heavily in upgrades. 600-watt solar panels powered a 400 amp-hour lithium battery bank, a 30-liter per hour Spectra desalinator ensured potable water, and a freezer with reinforced insulation stored provisions. The navigation system included a Raymarine Axiom chart plotter, Class B AIS, a 24-mile radar, and an ICOM M506 VHF radio with DSC. For safety, he carried an ACR GlobalFix V4 EPIRB, a Viking rescue life raft for one person, inflatable life jackets with strobe lights, and a flare kit with handheld and parachute flares. His Dacron sails with 3 reefs in the main were new, designed for strong winds. But there was a critical flaw. Elliot had not installed a wind vane or backup steering system, relying on the Simrad AP44 autopilot in the keel-mounted rudder. He had also overlooked signs of corrosion in the rudder shaft during the last inspection in Bali, a mistake he would deeply regret. The passage had started well. Departing from Benoa Harbor in Bali, Elliot navigated through the Lombok Strait, facing currents of up to 4 knots that demanded constant adjustments. He passed through the Arafura Sea, staying south of the K Islands to avoid reefs, and entered the open Indian Ocean. His route aimed to hold the 10th degree south latitude, taking advantage of the south equatorial current, which flowed west at 1 to 2 knots. He used Admiralty nautical charts, supplemented by the chart plotter, and verified his position with a sextant, a skill he had learned as a backup. The first 2 weeks were calm, with 15 to 20 knot winds and a smooth sea. Elliot maintained a strict routine. He checked the engine daily, inspected the sails for wear, and adjusted his course based on GRIB weather files downloaded via an Iridium GO! Satellite. At night, under a star-studded sky, he jotted reflections in a journal, battling the loneliness the sea imposed. "The ocean is a mirror of the soul," he wrote once. "It shows you who you are, and sometimes you don't like what you see." Trouble struck in the third week, 1,200 miles from Mauritius. An unforecasted low-pressure system formed rapidly, bringing 35-knot winds and 5 to 8 meter waves. Elliot had reduced sail to the third reef and disengaged the autopilot, taking the helm manually. The Solace climbed and descended the waves, its hull groaning under the strain. He knew he should have diverted north, seeking shelter in the Chagos Islands, 800 miles away, but he trusted the boat would hold. At 2:47 in total darkness, a violent impact shook the vessel. The sound, like an underwater thunderclap, came from the stern. Elliot rushed to the helm, but the wheel spun freely without resistance. The rudder was unresponsive. He descended to the rudder compartment, lit by a headlamp, and found the worst. The rudder shaft, corroded by years of saltwater exposure, was broken. Worse still, the impact, likely a floating container, common in the Indian Ocean, had opened a 30-centimeter gash in the hull, just above the waterline. Panic hit, but Elliot forced himself to focus. He grabbed his toolbox, a repair kit with fast-curing epoxy and fiberglass patches. He tried to seal the gash, but water poured in faster than he could pump, with the whale gusher manual pump. The Yanmar engine, which he attempted to start for maneuvering, failed, its electrical system compromised by the water. Desperate, he improvised an emergency rudder, lashing a spare spinnaker pole to the transom with Dyneema lines. But the waves' force tore it away in minutes. The Solace was adrift, spinning like a toy in the ocean's hands. With each wave, the gash widened, and the water level in the bilge rose. Elliot knew the boat was lost. At 4:15, with the Solace listing 30 degrees, he made the hardest decision of his life: abandon ship. He donned his inflatable life jacket, grabbed the emergency bag with his passport, journal, and supplies, and activated the EPIRB, its 406 MHz signal, alerting COSPASSARSAT. He inflated the Viking life raft. Cutting the line tying him to the Solace felt like severing a piece of himself. He watched, tears mingling with sea salt, as the sailboat, his home for 3 years, sank slowly, swallowed by the waves. In the life raft, the reality of survival hit like a punch. The raft, 1.8 meters in diameter, was claustrophobic, rocking violently in the waves. The emergency kit was standard for offshore passages, but Elliot knew survival depended on rationing and ingenuity. He divided the water into 250 milliliter daily doses, enough for 10 days, and the rations into 100 grams per day. The rainwater collector, a nylon funnel, became his salvation when sporadic storms dumped fresh water. With the fishing kit, he caught small fish, like flying fish, which he ate raw, sliced with a Leatherman knife. Each meal was a battle against nausea and exhaustion, but he forced himself to eat, knowing hunger would kill him before the thirst. The days dragged in a cycle of scorching heat and freezing nights. The sun burned his skin, creating blisters he treated with cream from the first aid kit. Chafing wounds from the raft became infected, and he cleaned them with salt water, enduring the pain in silence. For navigation, he used the compass and his celestial navigation skills, estimating his position based on the altitude of Polaris. He tried to stay in the westward current, hoping to drift toward shipping lanes. But psychological isolation was the worst enemy. Loneliness drove him to talk to himself, reciting poems from his youth or singing Beatles songs to stay sane. He wrote in his salt-stained journal lines like, The sea doesn't want me dead, but it doesn't help me live either. Hope came and went. On the seventh day, he spotted a freighter 5 miles away, but his handheld flares, fired with trembling hands, went unseen. On the 12th day, the water ran out, and he survived on the rainwater collector, praying for storms. On the 18th day, a hammerhead shark circled the raft, striking it with its tail, and Elliot, heart in his throat, used the paddle to fend it off, fearing the raft would puncture. He began to doubt the EPIRB, wondering if its battery had failed or its signal hadn't reached the satellites. But on the 21st day, at 6:34, a miracle, the roar of an engine. A Panamanian freighter, the MV Ocean Star, spotted the raft 300 miles from Mauritius, responding to the EPIRB's signal. Elliot, emaciated, sunburned, and nearly unconscious, was hoisted aboard, wrapped in blankets, as tears streamed down his face. "I survived," he murmured before passing out. Aboard the freighter, a doctor treated his dehydration and infections. In Port Louis, Elliot spent a week in a hospital, recovering physically, but the emotional toll would linger. He lost the solace, but gained a story he'd tell sailors in maritime bars, a story of mistakes, courage, and lessons. Reflecting, he identified his errors. Underestimating rudder maintenance, not installing a backup steering system like a monitor wind vane, and over-relying on weather forecasts. He learned the hard way the importance of regular inspections, especially of the rudder shaft, which should be checked for galvanic corrosion every 6 months. A sturdier repair kit, with stainless steel plates and titanium bolts, might have sealed the hull gash. A drogue or sea anchor, which he didn't carry, could have stabilized the boat in the storm. Elliot's story echoes historic voyages, like Joshua Slocum's 1898 solo circumnavigation aboard the Spray, facing storms and mechanical failures with ingenuity. Maritime culture, with its emphasis on preparation and respect for the sea, shaped the lessons Elliot would share. He learned the ocean demands humility, and that equipment like EPIRBs, life rafts, and flares is as vital as a sailor's skill. To sailors, he'd recommend always carry an emergency rudder, like a drogue system or spare pole, train for abandoned ship scenarios, and consult experienced sailors before long passages. Preventive maintenance, like checking electrical connections for corrosion and testing the engine weekly, can save lives. Elliot returned to sailing, but never again underestimated the sea. His story is a reminder that the ocean is an unforgiving teacher, but also a stage for human resilience. To you, sailors who live on the sea, I ask, have you ever faced a rudder failure offshore? How did you handle it? What would you do to prepare for a passage like Elliot's? What safety strategies would you implement to avoid his fate? Share your stories, because at sea, every experience is a lesson for us all.